let me go live on YouTube.
Got
But
it.
now I'm trying to find the business page. So
It says you're
probably,
live.
oh,
Says you're live on
yes.
YouTube.
Okay, so
All
that's
right.
awesome. So we are trying to figure it out for YouTube now. Put it into the chat here for my Facebook for you. Then, let's see, there's a way now for it to work into. Okay, so it just says I can YouTube live stream.
Great. Let's go with it.
We'll just go with this one. That works.
Let's talk.
Yes. So, welcome to Healing for the Soul podcast, with this being season number 4, episode number 36. I am your host, Robin Stoltman, and today I have my guest, Avigail Gimpel, who is a mom, a teacher, an ADHD educator, and college lecturer. And today she's on the show talking about alternative methods for ADHD. And so before we get started, remember every week I feature different guests to help you become the best version of yourself through different methods you may not have heard of or thought of. So let's get started. Thank you so much, Abigail, for being here. I really appreciate it.
It is such a pleasure. It is really nice talking with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I appreciate it. Like we've had this technology glitch that we started out with, and it's just like, I think that's honestly like one of the benefits of being a mom is that we have had to learn how to just roll with things.
Right.
And if you can't get it done one way, find another way.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a day that like began and finished the way I planned it. 6 kids in the middle. It's just not. Someone's gonna throw up.
Yeah, it's just gonna happen.
Or there's gonna be an emergency room visit. It's the way it is.
Yeah, pretty much. And then it's like trying to figure things out. And so what is your specialty and who do you like to work with?
My specialty is overall ADHD, and I actually love to work with kids directly. I'm a classroom teacher originally, so I love working with the students. Today, I work less with elementary school students, and I work with couples where one of them has ADHD, which I find extremely rewarding and fascinating because the couples are coming and they really want to put in the work. And I work with parents of kids with ADHD now, and that's also great.
That's awesome. So like I'm just curious, what are like the signs for parents to notice like a true ADHD versus like a screen addiction behavior? Because I know that with the screens more and more, it's like they mimic each other very much.
Yeah, so you just hit upon exactly my life view, which is that ADHD symptoms is essentially ADHD is real. I'm not one of
Mhm.
those. But ADHD symptoms is a red light for all adults, people who care about that child, to start paying attention. But that ADHD symptoms are caused by many different things. So there's, in my view, according to my extensive research, and also most of my kids being diagnosed with ADHD, along with my husband and many students, what I found was that really ADHD, there is no classic ADHD. It's ADHD
Oh,
symptoms
okay.
being caused by many different things. And one of them, which you hit upon directly, is a screen addiction. That's one reason a child will exhibit ADHD symptoms. Lack of sleep or poor sleep is another one, trauma, abuse are other ones, and a dysbiosis in the gut. If a child's having some physiological problem, that will also cause ADHD. And also, I guess the most classic would be an ADHD personality, which I call an instant gratification personality, which is a healthy variant on a personality, a more curious, wanting things here and now and fun and interesting. But all of those things are causing ADHD symptoms. And there's no one thing. You can't differentiate. What you got to do really is dig and find out why that child's struggling.
That makes a lot of sense because I know like when we talked prior to the podcast here and before we had issues today, I know you had mentioned that about for possibly like with my one son that has some, I know, I swear to God, he's got ADHD because he's always hyper, and it's just like compared to the other kids, he's the loudest, he's the one that I'm like, why am I having this much problems? And
Right.
I
And I
don't give
asked
my
you a
kids a
bunch of
lot of the
questions.
screen either. Yeah, and so I took and I started switching his diet because I know, like you had said about, well, maybe that could be a problem. I switched his diet to gluten free,
Well,
and he's gotten better. I'm like, huh. So there is something to the diet aspect of why he's got this behavior.
well, first of all, virtual high five. That's amazing. Good for
Thank
you.
you.
Wow, it's a hard thing. We have a gluten-free diet in my home, and it took me a while to be able to adjust. Now it feels like normal because once you get used to the new products that you're buying and the new recipes you're making, it's just fine. But that's a big shift. And carry on with it. He's a
I
lucky kid
will.
to have you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it because I know, like, the my mom, she took and she's like, well, he can have a cookie, so it was wheat, and I'm like, okay, fine, because his constipation problem that he had also went away at the same time, and I'm like, okay, fine, you can have hard poop, and then he's like, nope, he dropped that cookie fast.
Wow. So
So,
constipation is one of those things we're looking for with kids with ADHD.
I did not
And
know that part of it. I just thought it was
yeah,
like a bonus for me. I'm like, my kid doesn't have constipation, and then he's having better behaviors. So I'm
when
like,
a kid has constipation, it has toxicity re, re-entering his system all the time. Now that kid cannot be comfortable, nor can he think straight or act well.
no.
So that's a thing. That's one of the big clues. We're looking for constipation or a rash or very sleepy or other kind of asthma, allergies, things like that.
Yeah, he's
And
got rashes
right,
too.
and you told me he had some allergies
hmm
as well, right?
Um, the lactose intolerance.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know if he's got other allergies, but I know for sure he's got the rashes and that stomach problem. And I'm like, okay, so I switched like what you had mentioned, and it's amazing because it's only been like a week. That's the
It's
other
really
thing.
remarkable. So I met
Yeah.
with a kid who's
hmm
I was just doing carpool with this kid, very cute, gorgeous kid, and every week he came into the car and his nose is just running all the time. So I said to his parents' mom one day, I said, "Why don't you give him a break from gluten, see what happens?" A week later, he comes in clean face, so he's even more gorgeous. 3 weeks later, his nose is running again. I'm like, what happened? You were doing so great. He said, I know, I felt so well. And then the holidays hit, and that was it. My mom
Oh,
couldn't handle it anymore. Not judging that mom, by the way. Like I said, gluten-free diet is hard,
it
but
is
but
very
you can
difficult.
see it very quickly, especially in young children. And it's worth the effort because you might be completely changing your child's trajectory just by a diet change.
Yeah, and that's the beauty part of it because it's like the goal is not to take and make meal time or family time in general painful for anybody. It's just
Right.
like you want to be able to have that time. And that's like one of the classic examples I had earlier this week. You know, for Valentine's Day, my husband and I, we went out, or we didn't go out, but we kind of went out because we brought our food home.
All
So,
right, good enough.
yeah. So I'm like, it was kind of like we went out, but then two
You
of the
have a
kids
lot
were
of
up.
kids.
Well, yeah. And then we were doing that, and then I told him, I says, you know, there was jalapenos on the nachos that we had ordered, and I'm like, I'm not a jalapeno, so I'm like, we needed to take and either one, not give it to the kids because I didn't want to ruin that food for them forever, because I'm like, jalapenos are very hot, or
Yes.
two, I'm like, we just need to be more careful what we give him so that he doesn't, you know, so that the other kids didn't end up with that. But it's one of those things that for like the ADHD,
hmm
what have you found that works best for outside of the traditional medications? Because I know like that's what I was using. And then I'm
Right.
like, you know what? This isn't working. So that's why I
And you
like when I
were,
switched
as
the
I
diet.
recall, you were using a medication to regulate blood pressure.
Yeah, for the ADHD.
Right. Right.
And it's just like I told my mom and I told my husband, I'm like, this medication is not working. Yes, I could give him more of it, like the doctor planned on doing, you know, like if it quit working. And I'm like, I just think at this point, do I want a healthy heart for my child? I mean, it only took like 9 months and like how much praying to get him in the first place. But I mean, like, still, I'm like thinking logically as a mom, do I want this or do I want my child to potentially have side effects where he's got a bad heart, like what I've
Right.
dealt with, and all of these other things? And I'm just like, okay, if a diet change will work, I am willing to do that so he can avoid the other complications down the road.
Right.
So that diet shift was huge. I'm still
Yeah,
going to keep going because I'm like, this tells me a lot in it. But are there other ways to help
sure.
beyond just those two, but beyond the diet change?
Right. So that's actually why I wrote my book, because parents know in their gut that there's something wrong with their child. And even if the medication is useful and helpful, it tends to be a band-aid because it doesn't actually get the child
Yes.
to where the child needs to be. And it might be a very useful, necessary band-aid here and there, but we really do need to get to real treatments like the one you just did. So one that's excellent is exercise, kids getting out and exercising and spending time in nature. I was giving a class last night to my college students, and one of them comes from the countryside. And I mentioned that being out in nature is very, very valuable. And she says, "Oh yeah, where I come from, there are so many fewer kids with ADHD because we're all climbing trees." And so that's very valuable. That's not always available to many kids, but it is something that, when parents have a decision to make on the weekend, what are we going to do with the kids? Movie theater, mall, or a hike, or the beach? Go on a hike, get your kids out on the hike. And I know that when my kids were little, we took them out on a hike every Friday, and they protested in the car because they wanted to watch a movie. We got them in the car. We took them out on a hike. The second they got out of the car and just smelled the forest, they calmed down. And we just hiked all afternoon long. They came back happy, calm children. So that's another thing that we could do for free. And
True.
but of course, if we're dealing with a child who has an instant gratification personality, that means he's a kid who wants everything here and now and interesting and fun and all that. I don't know if you know any kids like that, but all of mine are like that.
All
And
of mine are.
all of yours are. Well, they got a pretty spunky mom, so I don't blame them.
I think that's where they get it from.
It might pop. I'm not I'm not diagnosing anyone on screen. That's for sure. Anyhow, so what's happening is, like I said, it's a healthy personality. But here's the issue with every healthy personality. Say a kid is shy, that's a healthy personality, but he has to overcome his shyness. Let's say, eventually he's
True.
going to have to do some public speaking. He's going to have to make friends. There's a lot of things that shy kids have to overcome. We don't call a shy kid disordered. We call a shy kid shy, and we say, okay, what you've got here on the one side is excellent, which is that you're diligent, that you, whatever it is. And then on the other side, let's work on bringing you out of your shell and helping you socialize better. So with an instant gratification personality, what they're great at is connecting with their environment. They very easily connect. They notice details. They have a very quick mind. They're innovative. On the one side, fantastic. That's going to be a high-tech kid. That's going to be someone who's like out there doing really great stuff. What they don't have is great habits. They're completely missing habits, because the only way, you and I as moms know this, the only way to create habit is by doing something over and over again. You think about
Yep.
like when you have your second kid and you have like one kid in one hand and one kid in the other hand, like the first few weeks is like, oh my God, this is a nightmare, because you don't know how to carry two kids and also survive. But a month
Yes.
later, you're like, I got this. This is okay. We created a habit. So these kids
Yeah.
never create habits because habit creation is boring. It's like the enemy of their personality. So that is something that's hard work, and we have to walk them through it. And that's a very big chunk of the work we do with these kids, is help them develop healthy, good habits, not to change them, but rather to preserve the beauty of their personality and add to it the weak parts, strengthen the weak parts.
I am so thankful for that part because, like, the whole time I started thinking about my husband because I'm like, he's very much, we don't need a schedule with the kids. And I'm like, okay, fine. We did it your way, no schedule. Life is hell. Just
You need
saying.
a schedule.
Yeah, you do. And I'm like, why do you think people go to work for 8 hours and their employer has, this is what you do during that 8 hours. If you need to take
Exactly.
a break, you get a break. Otherwise, you just work through. And I'm like, that's why adults have to have a schedule, because adults that have a schedule that stick to it are more productive, more happier. And he's like, well, that's not true. And I'm like, you know what? We did it your way. Now we're doing it my way. And I'm 100% sure my way is going to work because the kids need a set schedule. And I think that would help with like the ADHD part that you were just
It's a
talking about,
lifesaver.
you
It's a
know,
lifesaver. Yeah.
because I've noticed like the one child, especially, he's so loud in the morning. And I'm just like, okay, we need to quiet our mind, have quiet time, quiet thoughts, do that deep breathing. Have you noticed if that does work better with kids
The
and adults that
schedule.
have, well, not just like the schedule, but like the deep breathing, be able to recenter
Mm.
themselves?
Yeah. So actually, as a classroom teacher, what I did was before every lesson, not at
Mhm.
recess, but between lessons, a child should not have to sit through a double lesson. That's just not
No.
humane for a child. So what I did, and I actually taught very rowdy boys. And what I did was between lessons, we did exercise for 5 minutes where the kids got up and they did exercise right next to their desk. We did jumping jacks and push-ups and sit-ups, and they loved it. And I had one kid come up and be the coach, and he chose which 5 exercises we were going to do. And sometimes we did it with the multiplication tables, and they had to chant things together. It was a lot of fun. But before we started the lesson, they sat down and they deep breathed. And then we got going, and I found that to be very soothing and calming. And my third child actually is now a yoga trainer, and she started as
Wow.
a dancer. Yeah, she's danced since she's 5. She's a ballet dancer, very beautiful dancer. And can you tell I'm proud of her?
Well,
But
yes, I can very much.
she's amazing. Anyhow, so so now she became a yoga trainer, and that year of learning to become a yoga, how do you say yoga
I
doer?
think
How do
it's
you
a
say
yogi, I think is what they call
yogi?
them. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
all righty. But anyway, that has been wonderful for her. And on the days that she does yoga before she starts her day, it's a different day. And she's definitely a high energy kid. Her elementary school career was so fabulous in the way that I have a lot of stories from it, not in the way that it was calm and relaxing. You understand?
Yeah, I do very much.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
why I'm like, that's why I was so thankful to God when we got a playground, like a actual wood playground
Nice.
outside of our house in our fenced-in area, because I'm like, we need something for the kids. Like, we're probably like the only parents, like in Watertown that I know for where I live, that have our kids outside at the parks all the time. Because you go to the parks and a lot of them just sit empty. And
Yeah.
that's what I
Well, now that
noticed.
kids have screens, that has robbed us of park time. My
Yeah,
kids growing up, we went to the park every single day.
yeah,
Of
that's
course,
what we
we
were
bought
doing.
ices and ice cream for them on the way home. So I don't know if that counterbalanced each other. I wasn't as aware yet of diet. Yeah. It's
But
a learning
it's
process.
well, yeah, that's what I've learned. I'm like, when does this? Well, I'm excited that the learning one doesn't ever stop,
Never.
because I love that part. But at the same time, I'm like, when you had mentioned about like the different kids, like you become like this habit. Like the first two kids, you're like, okay, now I got it. And then
Right.
that's why I tell everybody, I'm like, why do you think it's easy? I'm like, it's easier after the third child. After
I
you had
think kid
the
number
first
4 is
three,
the easiest, right? Kid number 4. You never
um,
notice that he's arrived. That was mine. Like he just showed
pretty
up and
much.
like
I'm like
I
thinking,
right? I just knew how to juggle that. I had the skill. I'm like, I am a juggler. And then he shows up and I'm just like, oh, okay, one more ball. No big
yeah,
deal.
true. Yeah, yeah, because I'm thinking about it now, but I'm like, yeah, I'm just like, yeah, because they're all four boys, all four to start with. So I'm
Oh,
just like,
wow. Mm.
our first reaction was just like crying. We found out our girl, our fifth child turned out to be a girl, and I'm just like,
Well,
thank you,
thank
God.
God.
Yeah, the problem is all the boys are teaching our daughter things, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is just going to be fun. I'm excited though for the fun, for like the fun part of it, because it is fun raising a lot of kids. Except mine are
Yes,
all back to back, and that's is not as much fun, especially all C-section. So I'm like, I'm gonna get through it. Then I
you're
know,
gonna. The
yeah,
trick, they as a mom of six, I could tell you the trick here is to be in the moment because it passes so fast. I know you can't believe me
yes.
because yours are like
Oh
really
no,
little,
I do. I've talked to a
but
lot of
it
parents.
it shoots by, and what your job is to know that today is never going to return. This kid is not going to be in his tantrumy, delightful twos for more than a year. That's it. And that year is a precious year. Don't wish for it to be over. Be in it. Be in it because this is it. This is the journey. And it's a good one.
Yeah, it is. It's one hell of a roller coaster with the one. Like I said, I swear he's got ADHD because it's every day it's a roller coaster. I'm just like, seriously, just one day with being quiet, and then I'm like, even told myself this morning, I'm like, can I even imagine just no kids around right now? And I'm like, I got about 30 seconds. I'm like, yeah, I can. We're still good. I love them, but I've been like, it's just like that. I do love my kids. It's being able to have like that 30-second break of, okay, this is my reality out here. This is the reality in here.
Well, you're also homeschooling them, so
Yes.
they're always around. You don't have right. This year, I'm homeschooling my youngest as well, just because of the COVID restrictions. So it was incompatible with life. So
Yes.
I kept her home for the year. But yeah, that once a kid's home all the time, you really don't have a moment to have an independent thought. And you've got a lot of little ones at home. And I know as with one, and by the way, speaking of schedule, when she gets up in the morning, the first thing she
Mm.
does after praying is she writes down her daily schedule every single day with the times. And this is, she doesn't begin her day without her schedule. And that's really important to us. And then she checks it off as she goes through the day. And that's a skill she's learned. And it really keeps her calm. And she goes back to her schedule all the time. And that is key for a kid with any kind of ADHD tendencies.
That's very helpful because I know that's one of the things that I'm like, is it better to have like a set schedule, or is it better just to kind of have like an outline of like what you want to be able to do, or just at nighttime write up what we're going to do the next day?
So that's a
What?
great question because on the one, I'll tell you what, both, and I'll tell you
Okay.
why. Because on the one hand, I want to have some kind of structure. What time do we wake up in the morning? What's the basic thing? When are we going to eat breakfast? When are we going to eat lunch? I mean, obviously, we need to schedule our food because what's more important than
Yes.
that? And then we have a basic outline of a schedule, and my schedule is different every day. I'm meeting with clients, I'm going out to teach, different things that I'm meeting with
True.
you. So therefore, we have a basic idea of what we're going to be doing each day. But then my homeschooling lesson to my daughter, which is very different than being in school, is that I want her to be able to choose. I want her to tap into what she wants, what's good for her. And we have many different lessons throughout the week. And she fills into those slots that we've placed for in our structure. She'll choose history, and then she'll choose English, and then she'll choose. So she gets to choose according to what she's really into right now. Suddenly she'll be really into reading for a couple of days, and she just wants to finish that book. So I say, go with it, because in school, you have to do what you have to do. And what happens to the kids? They rebel. They
They,
don't want to do it. They're
yep.
resentful. And this is what I saw at the beginning when I was teaching her, is that she was trying to kind of cut corners and not really finish it, but not let me know she wasn't finishing it. She was treating me like her teacher. And I said, hey, 1 second, honey. I'm not your teacher. I'm your mom. And when we're home learning, and we're learning all the time, you are choosing to learn because it's good for you, because you want to learn. And that changed the entire dialogue. So part of our schedule is choosing because you want, and part of the schedule is we need to keep ourselves together so that we have a good, happy, productive day.
I would agree that is very important. Like everything, the choices especially. Because
Mhm.
I let my kids, as soon as they were maybe about 6 months, about 6, 8 months, I would bring them up to the closet and I would show them their clothes, and they would hang on to like one, and they're like, okay, well, we'll do that one. We'll wear that one today. Because
Right.
I think it's a good thing to start off with choices right away. Because
Yes.
then I see a lot of parents who are just like now realizing that their 3 or 4 year old wants to choose what they want to wear. And I'm like, how is that normal? Like, wouldn't it be better to start it when they're younger so that they realize that they've got choices?
Right. Although this brings me into another topic
Mhm.
that parents often ask about, which is rules and punishment.
Yes.
And and the truth is, I do feel like having I'm all into choice, like I
Mhm.
just said, but I do feel like my home is not a democracy and we don't vote on everything. And there are
True.
things that our children need to have strong parents that are leaders so that they feel calm. Because if we don't have the rules in the home, the children don't feel calm because we're essentially leaving them to make their own choices, and they're too little to make their own choices. It's kind of like giving your
Yes.
5-year-old the car keys. So we don't want to do
That would
that.
never
And
happen.
and therefore regulating screen time and regulating how a child is allowed to talk to his parents and how they're allowed to treat each other are things that we need to really let them know about and have consequences on the positive side, consequence of a
Yes.
tremendous compliment and being very proud of the children when they make good choices. And also we have to let them know with some kind of consequence when they've made a choice that wasn't good for them, because it doesn't build them up as a person.
That's true. And like what I tell my kids, I'm like, well, you can either let mommy put you in timeout. You can either go in timeout or you can clean like what I said you needed to clean up.
Right.
Or when you get older, you can let the cops take over, and that wouldn't be any fun at all.
No, no.
It's like I'd rather be a parent, not their friend, be a parent, do what it is that they need to do, so that way they don't end up having the cops having to take and do the discipline for them. Because
Right.
too many parents that I see that do that, and it's like you cannot be their friend and be
Oh
the
no.
parent. It does not work. You want a
Right. And
friend, go get an
society is
adult friend.
not gentle with our children. Only
No,
we
they're
are.
not. Yes. And they're very much like, you got to have things done now. Like it's always now, 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 now. And then we expect kids to not want it right now. And it's like, well, you got all these adults that can't control their own behaviors, can't control their own emotions. They're all over the place. And then you expect your kids to listen to you. Yeah, that's why we got the problems with the kids that we've got now.
Yeah.
The 20 somethings.
Right.
And I'm just saying, right now, if we were to go into a war, we would all be screwed. The USA would fall less than 24 hours. I guarantee it. It would fall less than 24 hours because all the kids today that are eligible to go to war, if there ever was one, we would be screwed. They'd be wanting their blankies, they'd be wanting their pacifiers and whatever else they want just to calm them down instead of going out and being a man, being that woman to go out and fight.
My son tells me that the US Army is the last place in America where people actually do grow up. That's his
It
assessment.
is, and it's
My son's in
sad.
the Army,
I
he's a
know a lot of
soldier.
people.
And he says that, that they do actually, well, he's not in the American army, he's in the Israeli
Mhm.
army, but and Israelis still grow up actually, because we live in a more complex society with
Yeah.
the enemy kind of all around us all the time. So the kids do grow up, thankfully, and society demands it of them. But he does say that the US Army seems to still raise raise adults. So hopefully what you said is not correct.
Well,
Or
I'm
we're going
just
to need
saying
a
a
lot
lot of
more of
them,
your
like if they
prayers.
had to go. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like if a lot of them had to go, like if they ever reenacted the draft, that's
Right.
what I'm
Then we'd
saying. A
be in
lot of
trouble.
them, yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
get
the
it.
draft part we would be. Otherwise, no, there's plenty that still want to go do that. And I'm glad that they do, because without our military, we would be screwed. But that's what I'm saying. We got to be careful too when we're teaching our kids young. That's why I'm
Right.
like, teach them young, teach them now, do
Yes.
this stuff now. So that way we don't end up with, we have a draft and then all of a sudden we got a bunch of them wanting their color books and their pacifiers because they didn't get their way.
Right.
I'm
Right.
just, that's all I was trying to say. I mean, like, This all has to do with the ADHD part, though, because it's like when you take away, um, like the screen time, like they're not doing as much screen time because that is one part of the ADHD. And then like the diet, when we can change that, we can do these different things like what we've been talking about. Um, from what I understand, everything is that it's a healthier way, not just for as children to function,
Mhm.
but then
Right.
for them to be functional adults out in society.
Exactly. And the most important part here for parents is not to pathologize our children. And the reason is when we pathologize them, we start feeling sorry for them. And we start feeling like, and the minute we start feeling sorry for our children, they become sorry children. So we bubble wrap them. Oh no, the child's suffering, the child. So I'm not saying the child's not struggling because we're starting from the point where this child is struggling, but that doesn't mean the child's incapable of digging his or her way out of the challenge with a lot of help from us. But the
That
minute
is
we see
true.
the child as a child we need to save and rescue and protect, what we've done is raise a child who's going to need his coloring book and instead of being drafted into the army. Now, not
Yes.
all men have to go to the army, not all women have to go to the army, but they
No.
are going to go into the workforce and they're going to be in university and they're going to have to face real life challenges. And when they fall apart every time they're offended or they are told they can't, or they were told that they're not as good as the person next to them, then we haven't managed to get them out of childhood. So the real key, and that's why I
Mhm.
have a problem with the diagnosis of ADHD, not because the child's not struggling, but just because the minute we tack on the word disorder, we feel bad for the child instead of saying everybody's got challenges. I have a son who has dyslexia, and he
Mhm.
taught me this lesson because I was taking him every week to the special program. And one day when I was dropping him back off at school after this program, he says to me, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to have a skill that no one else has. I'm going to know how to overcome challenges because I have to fight
Yes.
with dyslexia. And that is, so I could have been, telling him, poor child, and oh, it's so hard for you. And it is hard. It is hard. And I do say that, but I say it's hard. We all have challenges. Let's overcome it together. And you're a healthy, great guy with a lot of strength and ability, and you're going to get through this. And he said it back to me in the most powerful way.
And that's the amazing part because just because you have a disability does not mean that you can't do something. It just means you got to do it a different way. Like I've learned
Right.
that with my brain injury. I'm like, most people don't even know that I have one unless I tell
I
them.
didn't know.
And it's like, well, yeah, I had severe front right lobe one, so it's like right here. But
Hmm.
you would never know that. But I've had to overcome a lot of different things. I'm like, people compliment me on my organization. I'm like, I have to be organized because that's one of the ways I've had to compensate for that area of not knowing, like, okay, what was it? Where was my stuff at last? Because it has to do with the
Mm,
memory too. So I'm like, you can tack on that to your memory. You can tack on setting a schedule. Then it's like, okay, then life is more manageable than just saying, okay, I've got this brain injury and it just it's not helping, and staying stuck in that low state of that
right.
energy. And it's like
Right.
finding a different way to do things,
Yes. That's
which
it.
is yes, which is always helpful. Like I said, when we started this out, this whole podcast with we had the technology issues, we've had to figure out how to do it. We're moms.
And here we are on YouTube Live.
Well, yeah,
Who would have
totally
thought?
wasn't well, yeah. And it's just like I honestly think that's sometimes like the best gift of having kids, especially like so many close together that I've really learned is that it's more about not just so much staying present, but it's building that character at the same time of how
Mhm.
strong a person really is when they add more to it and then they realize I can do it. I
Right.
can do things. I just got to figure out a different way of doing it. And that's literally what you figure out as a parent every day.
Yes.
Every kid
Yes.
does not have the same personality.
No, I've got
They
six
don't like the same
PhDs.
food. True.
That's what I tell people. I was actually in a PhD program when my oldest was born, and I couldn't continue. Um, due to many different factors. And but then I went ahead and got 6 PhDs and 6 different children. They are all so different. Wow. I didn't know there were that many personality types in the world. Wasn't there supposed to be
Yeah.
something genetic where they were like similar to their parents in some way? And there's only 2 of us.
I know that's what I've been trying to figure out with the one. I'm like, I have no idea where you come from. Because I'm like, you don't act like me. You don't act like your dad. But then I see those little glimpses and I'm like, okay, we've got this.
You
We're
got
going to
this.
get through this. Yes. So, what is the best way for our audience to get a hold of you? And what is the name of your book?
Oh, I got it right
You'd
here. Hold
mentioned
on a
it.
second. Yeah. Isn't that a cute book? I
I
love that
like that
cover.
picture. That's awesome.
Huh? Okay, so my book Hyper Healing is available on Amazon and on all the other booksellers, actually, online booksellers. And you can get hold of me through my email address, which is info@hyperhealing.org, as well as through my website, which is hyperhealingadhd.org. And where else? I'm on Instagram, hyperhealingadhd. And I think that's a lot of places. I look forward to hearing from anybody. I love to get questions, comments. I love when people give me advice. So
True.
it's all open and available. And I always answer when people reach out. So please do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody who is either listening or tuning in to this live right now. Thank you for your time and your energy as always, and